This is a message from sponsor Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was getting frustrated by your forms. Now, Taxes is uploading your forms with a snap, and a TurboTax expert will do your taxes for you. One who's backed by the latest tech, which cross-checks millions of data points for absolute accuracy, all of which makes it easy for you to get the most money back, guaranteed. Get an expert now at TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service. See guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantees.
As a longtime foreign correspondent, I've worked in lots of places, but nowhere as important to the world as China. I'm Jane Perlez, former Beijing bureau chief for the New York Times. On Face Off, the US versus China, we'll explore what's critical to this important global relationship. Trump and Xi Jinping, AI, TikTok, and even Hollywood. New episodes of Face Off are available now, wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, and thank you for listening to The History of World War II podcast, episode 525, Alone, Isolated, and About to Die. When we last left off, General Ruoff's 17th Army, having been peeled away from Kleist's Army Group A, was heading west to make for the Taman Peninsula opposite the Kerch Peninsula, the idea being to regroup there, let the Soviets smash and weaken themselves against the defensive lines here, and at Rostov, reinforce the German units in both places, and then come out swinging, which today seems absurd. But the invaders had to think this way. Faith in one's self first, actions based on that faith second. But what the Germans could not know was that the situation of Army Group South, now broken into three, Army Groups A, B, and Don, had almost been worse. When the Soviets smashed through the Italian 8th Army to the west of Stalingrad in Operation Saturn, their objective had been to take Rostov as well, thereby trapping the whole of Army Group A completely. Fortunately for them, the Russians had misread how large the German pocket was and had to scale back their objectives, now Operation Little Saturn. Still, what they had achieved would set up their ultimate goal if the Axis forces could be kept on the defensive, i.e. reacting to Soviet moves. Either way, Hitler was now convinced that Army Group A had to pull back, and then he changed his mind, which was the beginning of the Kuban bridgehead. Unbeknownst to the Germans, on December 29, 1942, General Ivan Tuliulev, commander of the Trans-Caucasus Front, located just beyond Kleist's greatest penetration, was about to swing west and then north to close off Army Group A's way out. They were then to have met up with forces from the Southern Front, renamed the Stalingrad Front on New Year's Day, and thus trap Kleist's entire army. But that had not happened, as we have seen, and besides, as the 1st Panzer Army retreated by rail, the 17th Army separated itself and headed for the mountains above Tuapse, along the coast. But it wasn't until January 24th, just days before General Paulus surrendered his 6th Army, that Hitler allowed the whole of the 1st Panzer Army to come all the way back to Rostov, leaving 17th Army alone in the Caucasus. But even this was a close-run thing, as 4th Panzer Army had to fight like hell to keep a corridor open to Rostov for the retreating 1st Panzer Army. As for the 17th Army, the door was truly closed on February 6th, when the port city of Yitsk on the Sea of Azov, about 140 kilometers or 87 miles to the north-northeast of the Taman Peninsula, was retaken by the Soviet 276th Rifle Division. And, having studied their Napoleon, the trapped 17th Army was the perfect next target, versus the still strong remains of the three army groups now back together. And fortunately for Moscow, plans for a Soviet amphibious landing at Novorossiysk, the large port city on the southern side of the Taman Peninsula that the Kuban bridgehead sat on, had already been drawn up in November of 42. And now back to January of 43, the Stavka called for a renewal of that attack, but to be augmented by a ground operation that would come from the east that would, together, fully isolate General Ruoff's men. With the amphibious landing in the south coming in behind the current Axis line and the 47th Army, led by General I.E. Petrov, coming from the east, pushing in and then joining up with the seaward troops, the Germans would be cut off from pulling back even further into the Kuban bridgehead on the Taman Peninsula. And given the success of crushing the German 6th Army and putting pressure on Rostov, much less saving their oil, the Stavka pulled the trigger on this attack plan against the German 17th Army.
It's tourney time, and with FanDuel's Dog of the Day, you could get a daily profit boost during the College Conference Championships to bet on any underdog. So get ready to celebrate some upsets.
No one saw that coming, except for me, baby!
21 plus in present in select states. Opt-in required. Minimum plus 100 odds required. Bonus issued is non-withdrawable profit boost tokens. Restrictions apply, including token expiration and max wager amount. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
First, some reorganization was needed. The Trans-Caucasus Front Northern Group was renamed the North Caucasus Front. As for General Chulnev's Trans-Caucasus Front, that returned to its primary role, guarding the southern frontiers with Iran and Turkey. Stalin had not lived this long by assuming or trusting anyone. Back to the battle plan. This had to work as Sevastopol and Novorossiysk had been in Axis hands since September of 42. And with losing these two large port facilities, the Black Sea Fleet had to station themselves just over 200 miles or 321 kilometers to the southeast at Poti in Georgia. And that port was much too small for the Black Sea Fleet. No, with Novorossiysk retaken, the fleet would be based that much closer and the harassment of Sevastopol could begin. The amphibious landing would actually take place at Yuzhnaya Ozieka, about 30 kilometers or 18 miles southwest of Novorossiysk. This was decided by Admiral Oktyabrskij, the commander of the Black Sea Fleet from the Crimea series. The actual landing of men would take place on February 4th at 1:30 a.m. Quickly, the plan came together. At 12:45 a.m. February 4th, 45 minutes before the landing, 80 men would be parachuted in just north of Yuzhnaya Ozieka. Meanwhile, the closest German positions would be bombed. 15 minutes later, a naval bombardment would commence from 2 cruisers and 3 destroyers. 15 minutes after that, now 1:30 a.m., the main landing would take place, along with a diversionary landing closer to the port city, Novorossiysk, just to its south. The men of the main landing party would have machine guns and anti-tank guns, and they had trained hard during the month of January. But to borrow a line from one of the Flash's main enemies, Captain Cold, Leonard Snart, he once said, "You make the plan, you implement the plan goes to crap, you make a new plan." So back to the real world. During the planning and practice for this Operation C, several Soviet officers had doubts about some of the details of this attack plan, and they started speaking out. The weather around Yuzhnaya Ozieka was unpredictable this time of year, which affected sea conditions. There were too many enemy mines in the nearby waters. And wasn't the landing site just a bit too far away from the main port city? Once anything started, the Germans would have time to prepare a proper defense. But the biggest problem with the Admiral's plan was the main condition that was to have set it off, namely that the 47th Army pushing west from landward had not yet come far enough, meaning the amphibious landing would not receive support. There would be no linking up. Specifically to the northwest and northeast of Novorossiysk, the men of the 47th Army had not pushed in enough to cover the amphibious troops' northern flank. To wit, a classic military mistake was about to be made. History is scattered with, this cannot happen until that happens. But here and now, this idea was turned on its head. The amphibious landing would happen even though the more northern fighting was not going well, but now it would be the landing that would serve as a distraction to the Germans just to their north. In other words, the northern fighting to help the south was now the southern fighting to help the north. Despite this mental gymnastics, the go-ahead had been given. The first landing group that was to put feet ashore left their original port late. It was to the southeast, further along the coast. But, as a naval officer quickly noticed, the waters were rough, slowing down their progress. The naval officer in charge of getting the troops to land contacted his immediate supervisor and Admiral Otabrisky, asking for a 90-minute delay, though asking may be the wrong word here. The commander's immediate supervisor, Vladimirsky, approved the delay without hearing from Admiral Otabrisky, which meant the naval bombardment was delayed, but not the other diversionary landings, nor the second landing wave of men, nor the airborne troops, nor the air raid that started attacking the enemy on time, which was now not on time. But it did notify the Germans and the Romanians in the area that something was afoot. And if you, dear listener, are not yet cross-eyed, try this. When Admiral Otabrisky got the request for the delay, he was disinclined to allow it. He needed the cover of darkness, and not just for the opening shots. So he ordered the attack to go forward on time, no delays. But his response did not get to the commander who requested it, nor his superior. And the admiral did not tell the air support about the non-delay. The same was true for the parachute and even dummy landing groups. The result of all this? Soviet chaos and Soviet deaths.
Incoming transmission.
Hello, my name is Matt.
And I'm McKinley. We are the father-son team that brings you History Dispatches.
History Dispatches is a short daily history show where we talk about topics from all over the world and all throughout history. We talk about people, places, events, and even objects.
While anything is fair game, we have a soft spot for the weird, the wacky, and the obscure things you may have never even heard of.
Do you have any examples?
How about Wojtek, the bear who rose to the rank of corporal in the Polish army? Or the Great Emu War? Or how about the biggest treasure take in the history of piracy?
That sounds cool, but do you have a story about the head of Oliver Cromwell? Or one about the ancient library of Alexandria? And a story about the first woman to climb Mount Everest would be cool.
Well, we got those as well. Every weekday there's something new and fun.
Sweet. So how do I get this trove of goodness?
All you have to do is go to historydispatches.com or just look for History Dispatches in your favorite podcast app.
The bombing raids and bombardment for the first time Katyusha rockets were on naval vessels for the red herring landing sites went on as planned, as did the parachute drops just north of the landing site. However, one of the planes could not find the drop zone, so it turned and headed for home. Thus, the airborne troops were now 25% weaker than planned for. In exchange, the Germans of the 17th Army and the Romanians of the 3rd Army were not only on alert, but, judging by the landings of the airborne troops, could guess the true coming amphibious landing site. The Germans in the area, the 5th Corps, at 12:35 a.m., placed their troops and the Romanians along the southern coast on their highest alert. Adding to this tale of not being at home for Mr. Cockup, when the naval guns did start to go off at 2:30 a.m., their 30-minute bombardment did little damage to the enemy's guns or to the German or Romanian defenses. After the 30-minute shelling was over, 2 cruisers started going inland to cover the landing craft, yet the 3 destroyers stayed back so they could keep firing. At 3:30 a.m., when the first landing craft approached the shore, they were lit into by Axis guns, specifically the Romanian 10th Infantry Division and a small group of German specialist troops. The other landing craft, Bolanders, shallow, draft, self-propelled barges, which were carrying the tanks, panicked, and they released their charges too far from land. 20 tank engines were quickly flooded, could not start, and were eventually destroyed. Soviet losses came fast and heavy. Also, one of the destroyed cutters carrying troops to shore had on it the spearhead's commander, Captain 3rd Rank or Lieutenant Commander A.P. Ivanov. Now the men who were on shore were leaderless. And what was one of the main jobs of the leader? It was to tell the Bolanders to come closer to shore before discharging their tanks. Still, 1,427 men reached shore and started to move inland, supported by 10 Steward light tanks that had reached land. But their progress was quickly held up by Romanian troops. Another Soviet captain, Kuzmin, took command and ordered a large group of Navy infantrymen to go up a ravine that was weakly defended and then circle back and hit the blocking Romanian unit from the rear. The rest of them would then attack from the front. This worked out as hoped, and soon a hole was in the Axis line. As planned, the Soviet troops started making their way north to capture the town of Glebovka, but the men and the tanks that did survive and reach the beach were not enough to cut through the resistance to reach the town. They had taken heavy casualties just to get to this point, but now they were falling back, or rather being pushed back to the shore. When they came to a stop, they were about 1 kilometer west of Yuzhnaya Azieka. Then the sun rose on February 5th. With the plan falling apart, the Soviet forces fell apart as it retreated. In the end, just over 200 men made their way to the southern coast and were picked up by motorboat. At least 542 men were captured, the rest either captured earlier or killed. By February 6th, it was over. The German 17th Army reported to Manstein and Berlin that the attack had been repulsed, and 31 U.S.-built tanks were scattered from the waters to further inland, all destroyed. Ironically, one of the diversionary landings of 250 men at Stanichka to the southeast of Novorossiysk on the bay's western shoreline did its job, per the plan. But more than that, they retained a toehold. This, of course, would be a priority for the Germans to also destroy, for if the Soviets decided to reinforce it, soon a unit of 5,000 Soviet troops was on its way to Stanichka, as were German units. Who would get there first? Greetings, everyone, from Central Virginia. So this probably will only take one more episode, maybe two more, but I doubt it, to finish off what's going on here on the peninsula, and then we'll see what Army Group South does then, and then there's also the Crimea as well. So I don't have any new members today, but I would like to just randomly pick some names and thank these people for supporting the show. I really do appreciate it for a lot of different reasons that have nothing to do with you. It's the industry. Times are pretty hard right now. And so again, I appreciate all the support. Let's see here. Randomly chosen members: Pamela Zeman, Curtis Parrish, and C.S. Fowler. Thank you very much for supporting the show. You don't know what it means to me, so thank you. And as far, I did have one donation. Let's see here, Mark Stanyan. So Mark, thank you very much. Hugs and kisses. Anyway, so we'll keep this going. We'll see what happens down here in the South, and then we'll kind of focus on Army Group South larger, and then we'll go back up to Army Group Center, where they've just been slugging it out around Rizhev. They're just going back and forth. I think the Soviets lose like hundreds of thousands of troops, but again, it is getting them experience, and it is keeping the Germans in place. So again, we'll get to that later, but this is the tide is definitely turning. So we'll see how it goes. But as always, take care, everyone.
From the creators of the popular science show with millions of YouTube subscribers comes the Minute Earth podcast. Every episode of the show dives deep into a science question you might not even know you had. But once you hear the answer, you'll want to share it with everyone you know. Why do rivers curve? Why did the T-Rex have such tiny arms? And why do so many more kids need glasses now than they used to? Spoiler alert, it isn't screen time. Our team of scientists digs into the research and breaks it down into a short, entertaining explanation, jam-packed with science facts and terrible puns. Subscribe to Minute Earth wherever you like to listen.
Welcome to True Spies. the podcast that takes you deep inside the greatest secret missions of all time.
Suddenly, out of the darkness appeared Bin Laden.
You'll meet the people who live life undercover. What do they know? What are their skills? And what would you do in their position?
Vengeance felt good. Seeing these people pay for what they'd done felt righteous.
True Spies from Spyscape Studios, wherever you get your podcasts.